valiantly to recover from the disaster, which is the last couple of years, meaning 2015, 2016, of the Obama presidency, his second term. But, oh, my goodness, try as we might, we just can't pull this off because it's a global situation, you know, which, of course, the Power Elite gave us for this very reason. And so he'll try and, but, oh, shucks, you know, we just can't make the changes necessary. We tried, you know, but we're hooked up with Greece and everybody else, right? Okay, so everybody goes in the tank, and my, you know, what can we do? The dollar, the lira, the pound, the yen, so forth and so on. The franc is all debauched and debased and so forth and so on. And so, gee, I guess for international transactions, we'll just have to go with a world currency. And what shall we call it? Let's call it the phoenix, you know, rising from the economic ashes of the past and so forth and so on. And so anyway, I've been through all this, and that's what's on the cover of the book. And so that's the reason I'm going through all this is it's one thing for me to say it. This is what I'm saying is going to happen. This is a prediction, and I give the reasons. It's another thing when you actually hear a David Rockefeller say in his own words, secret cabal conspiring. So in this case, it's one thing for me to say economically such and such is going to happen. It's another thing for this fellow, this famed investor Jim Rogers, hooked up with George Soros, to say the same thing. You know, he says the same thing, and all of a sudden, woo, wow, look at that credibility. Wow. For me to say it, who cares? But for him to say it, it just adds a note of emphasis, even though he uses these words like may and could and so on, that it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
If I could just comment for our listeners, certainly you can go up on your computer, go to your search engine, and type in Jim Rogers' recent interview saying of financial catastrophe coming, something like that, financial collapse. And it's well worthwhile reading what Jim Rogers says, because he's actually saying that it's simply not a matter of if, but when this whole thing falls apart. And of course, what he's talking about is we are losing the status. The dollar will no longer be the reserve currency of the world. Go right ahead.
Right. And the rumor sort of is they'll try a basket of currencies, and they may do that, but you know that's not going to get it either, because the whole planned incompetency is that oh look, we'll try a basket of currencies, and then somebody will say, but aren't all those currencies sort of debased? Well, yeah, you got a good point there. Gee, I guess we'll just have to have a new world currency. Yep. Too bad. And, of course, the reason they want the world currency is because once you have a global currency, then you lose a tremendous amount of your national sovereignty. You know, you're hooked up with the management of the global currency. And so, the people managing it, and, guess who, right? The managers for the Power Elite will be managing that, and then, of course, the managers will be managed by the Power Elite themselves. And since they're managing this global currency, then they will get to say what's in your budget in Greece and our budget here and the budget in Japan and the budget everywhere. And once you get to this, this group on high telling the American people that you're no longer in control of your budget and what you can spend and not spend stuff on, we are. Once you've done that, it's over. That's it. Goodbye. No more sovereign America, no more sovereign Japan, sovereign Russia, sovereign anything. And that's the plan. That's the plan. Okay, now, when we get back where we were last time, continuing in the book, the Power Elite, their history and future, we had gotten so far into the chapter on the Illuminati, where they're actually talking about what's occurring today. And that's why all of this is relevant. I mean, if I say, hey, let's talk about the Illuminati, it says, aren't they some sort of funny group 200 years ago? Well, yeah, they were 200 years ago, but what they did then is specifically occurring today. And there's a reason for that, and we'll pick up after the break.
And what people really don't understand is that there is a small group of people who are totally dedicated to the destruction of the sovereignty of this country, the sovereignty throughout the world. They want a one world government, a one world financial system. They want to destroy Christianity because they certainly worship a different God. And if you doubt that, you go to the Trilateral Commission website, trilateral.org, and look at their logo. 3 sixes joined together by an upside-down broken cross. Dr. Cuddy, you go right ahead.
Okay, and just for a minute, picking up on what you just said about they are undermining national sovereignty, this is part of the plan. Now, that's not just myself saying that. One of the people who was a member of Cecil Rhodes' Secret Society was Arnold Toynbee, and I found a speech of his in Copenhagen in 1931, and he basically said, now this is 40 years after Cecil Rhodes founded his secret society. You know, if you talk to some of these Rhodes scholars, they poo-poo the idea of a conspiracy, and they'll say, well, yeah, Cecil Rhodes may have mentioned something like that, you know, because they can't really deny what Quigley wrote because he had the documents, right? So they try and, you know, deflect it by saying, well, yeah, I guess he did sort of think about that, but then he dropped the idea and decided to go with the Rhodes scholars instead. This is just a wonderful, happy, happy thing, and so just shut up and go away. But I'm not shutting up. I'm going away, at least not, you know, willingly. And so what I like to point out to these guys is not only did William Stead, his right-hand man, afterwards say, no, you know, Milner executed it. We just didn't talk about it much because, you know, if you're forming a secret society and plotting something globally, you don't want to run your mouth about it or it wouldn't be, you know, secret. And so the example I give is this Toynbee speech 40 years later. You know, so, I mean, if Cecil Rhodes' plan to take over the world, you know, fancied the charms of young America to participate in the scheme to take the government of the whole world and will absorb the wealth of the world, those are two basic things Rhodes did. I mean, if he dropped that, then how come Toynbee, who's a member of the group 40 years later, is delivering this speech in Copenhagen in which he says specifically, yeah, we're undermining national sovereignty, but if they find out about it, we'll just lie. We'll lie with our lips about that which we're trying to accomplish with all our might with our hands. That's his quote. That's what he says. So if Rhodes forgot it, about it, and Milner forgot about it, how come Toynbee 40 years later said, yep, that's what we're up to in 1931? And then that was picked up 40 years later by Richard Gardner, you know, an end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece. And then the economic point of that, he said, was GATT. I mean, that was what he was talking about. We used GATT to do it. And that's why Bill Clinton had to replace George H.W. Bush after just one term. You know, usually it's two terms Democrat, 2 terms Republican, 2 terms Democrat, 2 terms. But this time George H.W. Bush only had 1 term. Say, well, hey, you know what happened? Was the 2 terms? Well, at that point, they needed a Democrat to twist enough Democrat arms. They had enough Republican arms. Didn't have enough Democrat arms to pass GATT, you know, NAFTA and GATT, which were very, very important to this global machinations they were going through to ruin us and force us into this global currency. And so that's what Gardner said. In run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will get us much further than the old-fashioned frontal attack. And then he went on to explain how GATT would be a really, really important part of that. And it is. You got these unelected bureaucrats over there making these decisions for the World Trade Organization, and we, the U.S., gets, you know, voted down on these decisions by about 80% of the time. We only win like, you know, 20% of the cases. The rest of the time, you know, they say, you're wrong, too bad, you got to change. Literally. I mean, they forced, I put examples in my book, The Globalists, how they forced us to change our law to be in compliance with GATT and the World Trade Organization. Now, once you've done that, I mean, you really are no longer completely sovereign. At this point, right now, we are no longer completely sovereign. You know, we have, you know, we still have some sovereignty, but that's what, you know, that's what the world currency is going to cure, or, you know, whatever.
Hold that thought, Dr. Cuddy, hold that thought. We'll be back here in just a moment here. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and Dr. Cuddy is simply just saying that people don't understand that the basic thrust of the people who control both political parties is to do away with national sovereignty. And basically today, America is the dominant, political dominant military force in the world, but we are using certainly our military and financial power to destroy the sovereignty of nations throughout the world, but they're also destroying our national sovereignty. And of course, you do that by destroying our currency. That's why they're intentionally destroying our currency. Remember, it took them 200 years to get $1 trillion in debt. Now we get over $1 trillion in debt every year. And this is designed to destroy the value of our currency, because you have to destroy the currency before you can destroy the sovereignty. Destroy the currency while you destroy sovereignty. And then we're going to have some sort of a new one world currency going along with the one world tyrannical government that is being planned by this elite who, of course, have an intense hatred of Christianity and of freedom. And remember that old adage, those who will not be ruled by God will be ruled by tyrants. And the tyrants are out there rubbing their hands together because everything is going their way, because they can dominate our monetary system, they dominate certainly our media, they dominate our corporations, they have their people planted in our military, in our educational system, and even in our churches. Go right ahead, Dr. Cuddy.
Yeah, it's a complete scheme. That's what Rhodes said. Fancy the charm to young America to participate in a scheme, that was his word, to take the government of the whole world. Yep. And so people say, well, what's the Illuminati? They're these, secretive guys 200 years ago, but they're gone and so on. No. It's very, very relevant. So picking up with my book, The Power Elite, Their History and Future, it's offered by Radio Liberty. Where we left off was exactly what is relevant to today, because Baron Adolf von Knigge, Knigge, his code name was Philo, was Adam Weishaupt, who founded the Illuminati in May 1st, 1776, in anticipation of our Declaration of Independence, which they knew was coming. He was Weishaupt's second in command from 1780 to 1784. And according to John Robinson, who wrote that book, Proofs of a Conspiracy, back then, 1798, he said that von Knigge's favorite scheme, that's a quote, his favorite scheme was to create, quote, citizens of the world. So, you see, that's what President Obama is talking about now, citizens of the world. Now, this isn't just a Democrat thing. I mentioned this before. This is just, oh, look, Obama, leftist, socialist-leaning, moving this to socialism, citizens of the world, sure, yeah, we anticipate that. No. Remember, they control both political parties. And so I'm not going to belabor it, but I've mentioned in the past, now, the Secretary of Education under George W. Bush, George W. Bush is from Houston, said George W. Bush's U.S. Secretary of Education, shortly after he came into office, said, we are so pleased to be rejoining UNESCO because it'll give us a chance to have all our children made into citizens of the world. See? Same term. Doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. And that's why another Bush is really important. Really important. Okay. Now, what I say there is whether it's the subject of world citizenship or abortion or women's liberation or some other issue today, you can probably trace its origins back to being part of the Illuminati's plan. And that's what I've just been going through the last several weeks. Now, because world citizenship was an important part of their plot, just like it's an important part of the plan of the Power Elite today, it's also relevant, I think, that shortly after Ernst von Guckhausen, I know a lot of these are German terms, his name is Ernest von Guckhausen, was dismissed from the Illuminati. They sort of kicked him out. He had a tiff, and he decided to write this novel where he was exposing, what they're doing. He was very careful. I'll put it in the form of a novel. I'd say it's fiction. See, it's fiction, but it's really not. And his novel was called Exposure of the Cosmopolitan System in Letters from Ex-Freemasons. Now, that was published in 1786. They got ticked off with something he was doing, so they kicked him out. So he said, I'll fix those dirty guys. And so he writes this novel in 1786. And in there, he states there's a hero. There's a hero in the novel, and the hero asks his superior this question in the novel, quote, what purpose do the Illuminati have in infiltrating and dominating Masonry? That's the question. And the response of the superior to the hero was, quote, to emancipate all of mankind from religious and political slavery, end quote. And then the superior continued, and we'll pick up after the break.
All right, fine.